Sony earned about $781 million from physical PlayStation games during fiscal 2025, according to figures reported by The Verge. Meanwhile, digital game sales produced roughly $6 billion, while in-game purchases generated another $8 billion. Those numbers are the opening reality check, because nostalgia cannot argue with a revenue gap that enormous. Beneath the disc fight sits a harder comparison between artistic creativity and Sony's long-term corporate survival. Today, we will test Sony's strongest business case against ownership, preservation, affordability, and creative access. Ultimately, this breakdown will deliver one answer: necessary modernization, strategic overreach, or both at the same time. First, Sony confirmed that manufacturing for discs covering new PlayStation releases will end from January 2028. During its earnings discussion, Chief Financial Officer Lin Tao said broader content digitalization was the biggest reason. Crucially, Tao acknowledged that Sony had heard strong opposition and spent considerable thought and time considering it. Translation: Sony listened, understood, thanked everyone for caring, and returned to the spreadsheet without changing the destination. Worse, this was not confusion about why lending, collecting, preservation, resale, and cheaper access matter. Instead, executives understood those concerns and decided that understanding customers did not require following their request. Before the numbers become uglier, like this video, if buying entertainment should provide meaningful control over it. Also, subscribe for evidence-first gaming breakdowns where facts arrive before outrage and corporate language gets translated plainly. Now, Tao said Sony would move the decision forward cautiously after completing that internal consideration. Politely, cautious describes the vehicle's speed, not whether the vehicle is heading through your game shelf. Rather, Sony is switching on the hazard lights while continuing along the same road. Fundamentally, the problem is not tone, speed, sensitivity, or sympathetic expressions during an earnings call. Direction remains the problem, and Sony has clearly stated that the direction remains digital. Financially, Sony's choice is rational, which is exactly why criticism should examine incentives instead of inventing cartoon villains. Digital distribution removes disc production, packaging, shipping, warehouse space, damaged inventory, retailer margins, and several stock risks. Additionally, every direct purchase keeps customers inside PlayStation Store, where Sony controls visibility, access, and its platform share. Used copies create no fresh payment for Sony, while digital transactions travel through a storefront Sony operates. Retailers can discount boxed inventory, accept trade-ins, bundle older games, and compete against Sony's listed digital price. Eliminate those alternatives, and Sony gains a cleaner route from release to payment with fewer businesses taking cuts. However, digital distribution provides real benefits that critics should not pretend are imaginary. Customers receive instant delivery, preload options, easier updates, and access without traveling to a shop. Developers can release without committing every project to physical manufacturing, packaging schedules, shipping, and retail shelf negotiations. Therefore, digital storefronts can lower one distribution barrier for smaller or unusual games, but that conclusion needs limits. Equally, removing discs does not automatically create better art, fund riskier projects, or guarantee that small studios survive. Creativity enters the argument through documented developer concerns rather than convenient speculation. Evidence from Sandfall Interactive's leadership provides a direct example after Sony announced its disc policy. Sandfall chief Guillaume Broche called the decision sad for video game artistry, because physical games remain tangible objects people can hold. Specifically, studio co-founder Tom Guillemin said physical releases add production constraints and return less money per copy. Their comments establish both sides clearly. Physical editions cost more, yet creators can value them as part of the artwork. Microsoft's own 2026 developer panel offers evidence for the opposite side of the creative comparison. At GDC, experienced creators describe discovery as increasingly difficult inside a crowded, constantly active marketplace. Panelists explain that platform tools, cloud access, crossplay, and broader availability can expand a game's reach. Platform reach can expose creative work to more players, while community engagement can sustain discovery long after launch. Yet those benefits concern digital access and discovery tools, not the necessity of eliminating every physical edition. Discovery remains difficult even inside digital ecosystems, meaning access to a store does not guarantee visibility or survival. Consequently, Sony can argue that digital efficiency supports publishing, but cannot honestly claim discs themselves prevent creativity. Next comes Sony's phrase about engaging gamers within a future digital ecosystem. Whenever a corporation says ecosystem, Check whether you are the customer, the product, or the animal inside the enclosure. Convenience becomes dependence when one storefront controls prices, accounts, refunds, visibility, availability, and purchase conditions. Without new discs, players lose used copies, private resale, simple lending, physical collections, and one route-around platform control. Price competition weakens because independent shops cannot clear stock or undercut a permanent digital listing. Preservation becomes harder when access depends upon accounts, servers, licenses, compatible hardware, and continued corporate interest. Admittedly, modern discs are imperfect because many games require patches, downloads, online checks, or functioning servers. Still, physical copies usually preserve more practical freedom than licenses attached to one account and one controlled store. Creatively, that freedom matters because cultural works need continued access if future players and developers will study them. Commercially, Sony needs efficiency because any platform ignoring customer behavior, costs, and competition eventually loses ground. History makes Sony's position funnier because PlayStation once built consumer trust by attacking this exact direction. Back in 2013, Microsoft faced widespread criticism over Xbox One restrictions involving authentication, lending, and used games. Famously, Sony answered with a short sharing video showing one person simply handing a disc to another. Everyone understood the joke because PlayStation presented ownership as simple while Xbox had made it complicated. 13 years later, the company that mocked digital control plans to remove new physical releases entirely. Fairly, customer behavior has changed enormously since 2013, and digital purchases now dominate PlayStation's full game sales. Nevertheless, changing demand explains the strategy without erasing the historical reversal. Historically, Sony defended physical freedom when it improved PlayStation's position, then abandoned it when digital control became more valuable. Account-based ownership also looks weaker when purchased entertainment can disappear, because two corporations stop agreeing. Recently, Sony told UK customers that 551 purchased Studio Canal films and television programs would leave PlayStation libraries in September 2026. Licensing expiration caused the removal, although affected customers had used a purchase button rather than a rental button. Suddenly, buy starts looking like temporary adoption supervised by contractual terms almost nobody reads. Gamers are not paranoid when they connect that example to games, they are reading the receipt. Of course, film agreements and game agreements differ, so this case does not prove every downloaded game will vanish. More precisely, it proves digital access can depend on contracts customers cannot negotiate, preserve, or meaningfully inspect. Physical preservation also has measurable problems that extend beyond emotional attachment to boxes. Artistically, the Video Game History Foundation found that 87% of classic American games were commercially unavailable. Corporately, licensing support, rights, and expected revenue can determine whether older work remains available through official commercial channels today. Again, that study covers physical and digital history, so it does not prove discs alone solve preservation. Notably, removing another preservation route, while access is already poor, deserves scrutiny rather than cheerful ecosystem slogans. Ordinary players also have more at stake than collectors arranging steel cases beneath expensive lighting. Second-hand games matter to children, parents, students, low-income customers, bargain hunters, and anyone avoiding permanent storefront prices. The Week reported that the worldwide second-hand gaming market is estimated near $7 billion. Shops support that market through discounts, trade-ins, older inventory, bundles, and local price competition. Buyers can finish a game and trade it toward another, instead of filling an account with products they cannot transfer. Remove physical releases, and every new customer enters the controlled storefront without a legal used alternative. Supporters may answer that digital sales sometimes beat physical prices, and that point is completely fair. Regardless, those discounts remain temporary choices made by platforms and publishers, not competition created by independent inventory. Calling the backlash nostalgia therefore misses the practical issue of affordable access. Cheap access expands potential audiences, but no evidence guarantees every used sale would otherwise become developer revenue. Conversely, publishers need reliable income because creative ambition means little when studios cannot fund workers or another project. Balance requires affordable access without pretending corporate survival automatically demands the disappearance of ownership options. Boycott organizers are testing whether anger can become measurable behavior, instead of another week of furious posting. Organizers scheduled PS Blackout to begin August 23, asking supporters to avoid logging in, playing, or purchasing for 1 week. Importantly, this is a proposed community action, not proof that millions have committed or Sony already feels pressure. Management may be gambling that players can maintain outrage for less time than they can resist a major exclusive. Participation matters more than slogans because companies track purchases, active users, subscriptions, and playtime rather than emotional volume. If those numbers fall sharply, cautious corporate language may discover reverse gear with remarkable speed. Otherwise, Sony can classify the protest as temporary noise surrounding a transition it expects most customers to accept. Honest analysis means taking the boycott seriously without declaring victory before it begins. Forums provide useful evidence of public temperature, but they do not represent the entire PlayStation market. Reddit discussions show active anger, boycott support, preservation concerns, and promises to abandon future PlayStation hardware. Other users argue that digital purchasing already dominates, discs occupy space, and convenience matters more than resale. Half your feed may declare final betrayal while Sony quietly studies pre-order behavior. Online anger is loud, but purchase behavior is louder, cleaner, and easier to place inside an earnings presentation. Finally, Sony's financial results explain why corporate survival requires a careful definition instead of dramatic funeral music. Reuters reported that first quarter operating profit rose 40%, helped by gaming and image sensor performance. Although PlayStation 5 sales fell to 1.6 million consoles, roughly one-third below the prior year, Sony raised its forecast. Corporate survival, therefore, does not mean Sony must eliminate discs immediately to escape bankruptcy. Strategically, survival means protecting future competitiveness, controlling costs, and keeping spending within PlayStation's platform. Inside that model, digital demand dominates, distribution becomes simpler, and more revenue remains under Sony's control. Players receive convenience but lose leverage over pricing, lending, resale, preservation, and access. This comparison produces the definitive answer promised at the beginning. Ending discs is rational modernization for Sony's long-term business, but it also reduces practical ownership and independent market pressure. Both conclusions are supported, while claims that digital-only distribution automatically improves creativity are not. Executives do not need everyone happy. They need enough people angry, but still logged in. Artistic creativity needs sustainable companies, broad discovery, affordable audiences, and preservation beyond one storefront's commercial priorities. Conclusively, Sony is not saving art by killing discs, it is choosing efficiency and asking art, ownership, and players to adapt.